folks. Miguel back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and we are on another one of our classic fight review segment. And I'm joined by Todd Atkins, and we are going to look back at a classic fight. Going to go back to about 2004, so it's about 20 years old. And this one's got a little bit of a Hawaii flavor. I'm going to let Todd introduce it because it was his choice. It's a great fight, and he's got the Hawaiian the background for it. So gonna let him tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can get a little bit in depth to it. TJ Thompson, this was in Shudo Hawaii is what it was called, but it was a partnership that TJ had done with the Shudo organization. And I tell people on Oahu, because of this video store, which is called Video Systems, it was across from the Blaisdell Arena. It was a Japanese-owned video store, and they acquired a lot of these events that happened in Japan. And, they'd have them on VHS. It was all VHS back then. And a lot of the people in the MMA circles or jiu-jitsu circles all went there. So I think our exposure on Oahu was more to the Japanese events than more people realize. We were watching Shudo events, Pride events, things like that as much or more than the UFC. So TJ Thompson as well, he had kind of gotten exposure to Shudo probably through that. I don't know if it was through Video Systems as well, but he was a big fan of Shudo. He felt it was, and I agree with him at that time, maybe one of the better organizations that, wasn't a major, UFC or Pride, but
Yeah, they had
how
the
it was
best. They had the
run.
best fighters.
Yeah, and they had a tremendous talent back then. And now it's more of a, I'd say, Japanese promotion kind of for whatever reason. But the UFC probably had something to do with that. The increase of events in the UFC might have had something to do with that. But this is one of those fights TJ decided to work with Shudo to do the fight on Oahu at a Blaisdell Center. And Stephen Pauling, who Jens Pulver's fighting here, he had a real strong reputation as a great puncher. And he was doing pretty well in Shuto also. He had some good wins in Shuto. So these two guys matched up, and I think, in the fight, you're going to kind of see a situation where this is a fight that ended a guy's career in the case of Pauling. And someone who gets an injury to his eye socket. This is something where you can see kind of in real time something that happened that maybe people weren't necessarily used to, because the doctor came in and I don't think he caught it because he let him continue to fight. But you can see from his reaction, and we'll talk about that, that he knew something was up. He didn't react like someone who normally would have got hit in the eye.
Yeah, and it's a shame too because if you look at his fight record comes up on Sherdog as about something like 11-7. So like off the top of your, at first glance kind of thing, it's not the kind of thing that's super impressive. But if you actually get into, like, he lost to Kid Yamamoto, Pequeño Nogueira, he lost to the absolute best fighters of that era. And, he could put up a fight with anybody. I think we'll go 3-2-1, 1-2-3 here in a minute.
Pauling was the first guy to beat Kid Yamamoto. Kid Yamamoto shot in on him and he threw a knee that cut him.
Yeah.
And they called the fight.
They fought a couple of times. And he also rematched. He had rematches with some of the best guys. And this is UFC champion Jens Pulver heading out to the island to, he's trying to expand his wings. The UFC is not keeping him busy enough. The UFC is not making enough money. At this point, this was a viable option. So we're going to watch Stephen Pauling versus Jens Pulver. And this fight went down on July 9th, 2004. We'll do the 3, 2, 1 and press play. And right off the bat, we're looking at the Japanese lettering. You got the Japanese translation of Jens on the interview. So we're looking at a Japanese version of this is maybe what aired on TV, or at least what aired on the DVDs that you're talking about, the Japanese DVDs that were there. I've been to Japan many times, and one of the best things to do over there that we love to do was to go raid the DVD and VHS stores for fight tapes. and come back
Mhm.
with, as many of them as possible. There's some of these tapes in those stores in Japan sold for up to $100. They have a different economy and stuff, but wasn't cheap to get them, but
Right.
labor of love kind of thing. And we're in the ring, and Jen's kind of waving at the crowd. They touch gloves. Right off the bat, you can see Pauling's a stud. He's an athlete. Throws the first kick there. You didn't happen to go to this was in Oahu. Were you at this fight?
I think I was living in Japan at the time of this fight.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Very
it was
interesting.
2004. I was in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting here. So the Japanese obviously trying to nurture a league in the United States. Can't say they weren't getting top talent, with Pulver. Um, Pulver wasn't afraid to lay it on the line. He went on some of the smaller shows. Uh, you know, Obviously won more than his share. He's a champion, but he did take some losses on some of those shows every once in a while, and kept bouncing back. Not afraid to lay it on the line and fight tough guys. And as you said, Pauling was a guy with a reputation. Most of the Hawaiian guys, they know how to box. You know what I
Mm,
mean? That was you had Relson Gracie there, and there was some groundwork, but for
and
Ronald
there go.
John and guys like along those lines, you could see, and there you're talking about a weird reaction, right?
Right, that's where it happened. You can tell he's not reacting like somebody who just only got hit in the eye. You can tell he's a little like some. He could tell he's a little surprised by something.
So now with a broken eye socket at the end of his career, early in round one, this guy keeps fighting. He's taking shots to the face again. um, Jens is kind of a relentless guy, and in the ring isn't going to soften up or anything. He's throwing knees at him, and Pauling is still hanging in the fight.
And for people who aren't familiar with Shuto, they had a standing 8 count. So when Pauling got dropped, he got a
Yeah,
standing 8 count.
yeah,
So
and that's what it
kind of
was.
like boxing.
Yeah, that was an 8 count that he took there, and that's what the unusual reaction was. He had a couple of minutes there. There was no doctor check or anything like that. I wonder if a doctor check would have picked up on the break. I don't know. That's a very tough injury. A lot of the times it gets picked up after the fight. That they don't recognize it right as it's going on in the fight, and it's only after they get home with the injury that they realize what was going on there.
And I think the reason a lot of guys from Hawaii know how to box is there are a lot of these PAL Association boxing gyms there that kids don't have to pay to train at.
Okay.
So a lot of them, grow up training in these, especially kids who grew up in like the projects. There's
Yeah.
usually, and Max Holloway, someone we just saw UFC 300, he still boxes at Waianae Boxing Gym.
Yeah.
So, he grew up boxing there and he still goes there to spar. And so these guys get a lot of work in the traditional boxing at a young age, and I trained at one of those in Palolo, near the Palolo Valley homes. So there were tons of young kids training there, and they didn't pay a dime to train there.
The referee called the timeout there. And it looks like actually, that doesn't look like one of the Hawaiian refs, is it? You think
No,
Shudo sent their referee over, right?
that's Suzuki.
Okay.
They had Suzuki and Ogata were the two refs from Shuto. That's Suzuki there. They always both worked cards, so I think Ogata probably worked some other fights on this card.
No, for
They kind of
sure.
switch off. They switch
But what's
off.
interesting is that Shudo was investing in sending their refs over, which, for a smaller group is a flight from Japan is a flight from Japan. So they were putting a lot into this. And again, for a top rated fight like this, you can't really knock them, I mean, this is a UFC level fight. I enjoy the ring, by the way. I do like fights in a ring much better than fights in a octagon or a cage. The bottom line is unless you're sitting right at ringside, the cage is obstructed view. That's number one. And more reasoning is in the UFC, it's at this point you had the tendency on the wrestler's part, if they got you down, you've actually literally see Jens Pulver's teammate Matt Hughes was famous for it, where he would take the guy down maybe in the middle of the ring of the octagon and crawl to the fence so he could press him up against the fence. And all that's avoided in the corner, in the ring. It has its
Right.
bugaboos, like being stuck in the corner and that sort of thing, and maybe falling out of the ring and things. But I prefer that action to the cage, and I think ring also it just looks a little more classy. And I think Shudo was right along the lines of that, and that's why uh, you saw some Shudo early before 1993 in cages and in rings with like netting at the bottom and things as they tried out a few different options, but they eventually settled on the boxing ring or the boxing style ring for their matches here. Jens wasn't much of a ground fighter. He was a wrestler in college and stuff, but he liked to duke it out. And in Pauling, he's got a willing competitor. And so far, they spent the whole fight on their feet. And we're in the second round here. Pauling already, you know, received the injury that ends his career, and he's still fighting hard. He's still throwing with a lot of punches. A lot of heat on those punches. So a real competitor here. Pulver looks to be chill, business as usual. He's got that normal Jens Pulver body motion and things like that. But he's got a guy who's taking his punches pretty good too. Well, what's the
Mhm.
referee call the timeout for here?
Now this is where they look at his eye, and the doctor comes in and he doesn't catch it. You know what I mean? He just kind of feels
Okay,
on his eye, feels it's swollen, but
it's
he
it,
doesn't realize the damage.
yeah. I've heard people that have that injury. They can talk about like it almost being crunchy.
Yep.
But with the swelling that Pauling has, that may have tightened up and may have avoided detection of it. He was also cleaning up a little bit of blood and things like that. Not enough blood to stop the fight. It's a cut that's under the eye, right? So it's not going to obstruct view. So I hate it when when the doctors don't get their job done correctly, and we never saw Pauling again, which is a disappointment. I think you could see the guy was definitely a viable athlete, but you could almost not forgive the doctor, but you could almost understand how he would miss it. So, you're in there, you've got a limited amount of time, you're trying to get the fight started again. Pauling was probably telling him, "Yeah, I'm good to go." Um, Most fighters, that's the rhetoric you get from them when they're injured. So, yeah, I want to keep going. And on top of that, if it was a Japanese doctor, there may have even been a language barrier. They haven't
No,
really
it
left
was a
us.
doctor that TJ had.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't have they haven't ventured to the ground yet. The Pulver is
There's no
really,
ground in this fight at all.
yeah, no,
It's a boxing match. It's a boxing match with gloves on. That's basically it.
and Pulver
With the
really
MMA gloves.
at this point, if you're a judge, I think you got to be seeing it Pulver's way, even though Pauling is a good boxer and he's throwing big punches and stuff. He's never really rattled Pulver yet. Pulver continues to come forward. You don't know if that's because Pauling's having trouble seeing. Maybe it would have been different if the first punch hadn't hurt him, but and he's holding his own, but he is ceding ground and backing up a little bit. None of that looks terrific for the judges. So at this point, I think you got uh, Pulver probably comfortably ahead on his way to winning his second round here. It's a good
And
fight,
this
though.
was, for people who don't realize it, this was a big win for Pulver, really, because Pauling was no slouch, and
No, for
people
sure.
people in the industry back then knew how dangerous he was. So
For
this was very
sure.
impressive wins for Pulver.
TJ had a good, like I mentioned, Ronald John was another one of those guys. There were a few guys that TJ pinpointed guys that could compete on a world level, and Pauling is certainly one of them. Here he is in there against a UFC champion. Um, Physically, he looks like a machine.
Right.
And you could put him in there. They had already put him in against the very best that Shudo had, and they knew he could hang. So, with Pulver, they're probably hoping to steal a win. Um, and, falling again, they shake hands. They're in a competitive fight and they're appreciating each other's talent. They,
Mhm.
uh, as they go to the corner there, they're, they're pressing on that injury too, which is
Yeah,
probably, it's
yeah.
not a, I mean, you got adrenaline shooting and Pauling's a tough guy and stuff. The fighters hug going into the final round. So you can definitely say respect has been earned. And we'll see how this one concludes here because Pauling's starting to hold his face again. I don't know if they maybe clashed heads there or something, but those interchanges are rough. They're throwing heavy leather, and nobody's really mindful of their heads. It looked like Jens may have clipped Pauling on the chin on the way out with the back of his head as well. You don't know. Those exchanges can always be volatile. You don't know who's hurt or who's not banged up when they come together real close like that. But definitely a fight in 2004 that was, probably top 10, top 5 guys,
Mm.
Pulver, a top 3 guy in the weight class, if not the best at the time. And Pauling may not have been rated by everybody, but maybe should have been. You could tell talent wise, and you always kind of wonder now with retrospect, what if he hadn't gotten hurt and his eye wasn't messed up? He's probably has a little bit of effective vision, et cetera, et cetera. How would this fight have gone? Jens, for all his fantastic skills and ability, Jens could be caught and dropped. So we'll never know. We'll never know. And
Boom, there it is. And
yeah, he caught him. And again, you wonder if maybe his vision was a little bit affected.
right.
He didn't see that punch coming, or what the deal was. Maybe he was just tired, and Jens did the right thing. Jens didn't escape unscathed. It looked like he may have hurt
Yeah.
himself with the foot.
Pauling
Maybe.
had some strong kicks on his leg.
Oh, that
you
too.
know.
Yeah, that for sure too. He could be.
Yeah.
It might not be a foot. It might be the thigh that's a little banged up at this point. And Jens didn't show it during the fight. That's what a champion does. But afterwards, he was like, "Man, those leg kicks hurt." I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case because Pauling was good not only with the hands, but he was good with the feet throughout the fight. And my hats off to Stephen Pauling. It's a shame we never saw him again. Hopefully, he took care of himself and took care of his eye, made the right decision for himself. So there's no begrudging that, but the sport may have been robbed of a top-notch athlete there. So good stuff. Definitely good stuff there.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about Max Holloway, because we talked about that yesterday. There were a lot of really tough guys that came out of Hawaii, and this is another tip to Max and BJ Penn. Max and BJ were the ones who emerged the furthest. And maybe even Max has surpassed BJ now. I don't know. I would say maybe. But all these guys, there's only a couple that really, and so it's just a tribute to Max.
Yeah. My hat's off. I messed with Ronald Junn, and Ron
Great
Junn
fighter.
is a guy. I believe his son is a standout on the Bellator roster at this point, or at least fought on Bellator and was, a lot of them.
No, that was his nephew Kamaka.
Okay, no.
John has a daughter, Brienne, that was fighting professionally.
No, there's a Ronald Junn. Could it be that Ronald Junn is a grandfather? I don't think so.
No.
I think it was Ronald Junn III or something like that. That was
Ray Cooper's son.
Oh, it's Ray Cooper.
Yeah.
Another
He's
one. There you
PFL
go.
champion. Yeah.
And there's another one that was one of those guys. The only knock that you could really give the Hawaiian guys, and this is maybe not their fault. I believe they would have flown off the island for fights at any given time because they were all rugged. That way it's not like they were turning down fights or wanted to be hometown guys and stuff. But for mainland promoter to fly guys in from Hawaii isn't cheap. So they didn't get that treatment back in the early days, and that's one of the things that may very well have held them back. So until BJ Penn went beyond that, and then obviously his family also helped fund that because they had some money, and that's good. But some of these guys, like you said, from the projects and stuff, they may very well have been held back by the fact is that it was expensive to get people off the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah.
So we have just watched Jens Pulver versus Stephen Pauling, a classic from July 2004. Shudo, and I want to thank Todd Atkins for selecting the fight. Great fight, and for joining me along on the ride. Thanks to everybody for watching.
Take care.